Diana Ross has been one of the most celebrated voices in music history. From Motown hits that defined a generation to sold-out tours around the world, she has been the face of elegance, talent, and ambition. But behind the glitz, the glamour, and the flashing cameras, Diana Ross carried a secret she rarely spoke about. There was one person and one man who, more than anyone else in her life or career, earned her outright dislike. Not jealousy, not a petty disagreement, but something deeper, more personal, and more unforgettable. For years, fans speculated about conflicts in her life. Who could have angered the legendary diva so completely? Rumors swirled, tabloids whispered, and fellow musicians hinted at tensions on and off stage. But Diana stayed silent, until now. At 81 years old, she has finally revealed the truth. The name of the one person who broke her trust, undermined her confidence, and challenged her in ways no one else ever did. What makes this revelation even more shocking is not just who the person was, but why Diana despised him. It wasn't about money, fame, or public image. It was about betrayal. The kind that hits at the core of your career, your personal integrity, and the very foundation of who you are. For a woman who built an empire on talent, determination, and careful control over her legacy, this was a wound that never healed. And now, after more than half a century in the spotlight, Diana Ross is finally ready to share her story. The world may have known her as a queen of music, a style icon, a mentor, and a star, but behind that poised exterior was a woman who learned the hard way that not everyone who smiles at you truly respects you. And this one person tested that limit like no other. Diana Ross's rise to superstardom was never accidental. From her early days with the Supremes to her solo career that redefined music and fashion, she built an empire through talent, discipline, and an unyielding work ethic. But the path to success was never smooth, and it was never free of conflict. In an industry filled with rivalries, backstabbing, and inflated egos, Diana quickly learned that not everyone who appeared to support her truly had her best interests at heart. Among the many people she encountered throughout her career, there was one individual who stood out, someone whose actions, words, and decisions challenged her on a level no one else ever had. This wasn't a fleeting disagreement or a minor clash. It was a breach of trust that left a lasting mark on her life and career. Early in her career, Diana had formed professional relationships that she believed were solid. Based on mutual respect and a shared dedication to music, she trusted that the people she worked with would recognize her talent, honor her contributions, and act with integrity. But it didn't take long for her to discover that some individuals were motivated more by ambition than loyalty. According to insiders, this particular person repeatedly undermined her in private meetings, cast doubt on her decisions, and even took credit for ideas that were entirely hers. At first, Diana tried to ignore it, hoping the professional relationship could survive. But the pattern of disrespect continued, escalating in ways that affected both her career trajectory and personal confidence. What made the situation particularly painful for Diana was that this individual wasn't a rival in the traditional sense. He wasn't a competitor vying for the same spotlight. Instead, he was someone she had allowed close to her inner circle, someone she believed was an ally. In the music industry, trust is currency, and betrayal can be devastating. Diana later admitted that the repeated acts of disloyalty made her reevaluate who she could truly rely on. For a woman who had worked tirelessly to shape her image, protect her artistry, and navigate a male-dominated industry, these betrayals weren't just professional affronts. They were personal attacks on the very core of her identity. Despite the tension, Diana maintained her composure in public. Fans never saw the private struggles, the quiet moments of frustration, or the emotional toll these experiences took. She continued performing, touring, and breaking records, all while keeping a strict professional distance from the person who caused her the most pain. Yet the memory of those moments lingered for decades, influencing the choices she made, the people she allowed into her inner circle, and the level of trust she was willing to extend. And now, at 81, Diana Ross has finally begun to speak openly about this individual, acknowledging the profound impact he had on her life and explaining why, more than anyone else, he earned her lasting resentment. The individual who earned Diana Ross's lasting disdain wasn't merely difficult to work with. He was calculated in his actions. Early accounts from colleagues describe him as charming and persuasive in public, a man whose smile and charisma concealed a pattern of manipulation behind the scenes. While Diana poured her energy into perfecting every performance, rehearsing tirelessly and maintaining her image as a consummate professional, this person used her dedication as an opportunity to exploit, criticize, and shift the attention onto himself. What made it particularly infuriating, according to Diana, was the subtlety of the behavior. It wasn't obvious to outsiders. It wasn't confrontational in a way that could be publicly addressed. It was the kind of betrayal that eats away quietly, leaving the target second-guessing, doubting their instincts, and questioning whether their own judgment had failed them. Over time, the repeated slights began to accumulate, creating a pattern Diana could no longer ignore. One incident in particular stood out, and it became a defining moment in her perception of this individual. During a high-profile tour, he openly challenged decisions she had made regarding song arrangements and stage production, not once, but multiple times, in front of staff and fellow performers. According to eyewitnesses, he framed these actions as concern for the overall performance, masking criticism as advice. Yet Diana knew the truth. It was deliberate undermining. She later reflected that the act wasn't about collaboration or artistic integrity. It was about control, and for someone who had spent decades fighting to have her voice heard in an industry dominated by male executives, this was an affront she couldn't accept. Despite the betrayal, Diana chose a path that would preserve her reputation and career. She maintained professionalism, addressed the challenges privately, and refused to publicly expose the individual, even though doing so would have been understandable. Maintaining control, dignity, and poise became her form of resistance, but the emotional cost was high. The sense of violation, the realization that someone she trusted could manipulate situations for personal gain, left a scar that influenced her interactions, her willingness to delegate, and her perception of those around her. For years, Diana carried that tension silently, channeling the frustration into her performances, her meticulous attention to detail, and her unwavering commitment to excellence. Now, as she reflects on her career at 81, Diana Ross is willing to acknowledge the impact this person had on her life, and the reasons why he stands above all others in terms of the resentment she feels. It wasn't simply the actions themselves. It was the betrayal of trust, the erosion of respect, and the lesson that not all those close to you are allies. Her candid revelation demonstrates the depth of her insight into the industry, the importance she places on loyalty, and the enduring influence of those early experiences on her personal and professional choices. For Diana, the story is not just about one individual. It's about the lessons learned, the boundaries she established, and the resilience required to navigate a world where talent alone cannot protect you from deception. What made Diana Ross's experience with this individual even more painful was the way it blurred the line between professional and personal life. Unlike casual colleagues or distant rivals, this person had positioned himself as a confidant, someone Diana believed she could trust implicitly. They shared backstage moments, private meetings, and conversations that she assumed were grounded in mutual respect. Yet behind the facade of friendship, his behavior revealed a different agenda. He would subtly manipulate situations to cast doubt on Diana's judgment, often twisting her words or decisions in private discussions with others. Over time, the accumulation of these small but calculated actions left Diana questioning not her own abilities, but the integrity of those around her. She realized that in an industry driven by appearances, charisma could mask manipulation, and even those closest to her could act in self-interest rather than loyalty. Colleagues and insiders who witnessed these interactions described a pattern of tension that Diana endured silently. She was always impeccably professional, never letting frustration show on stage or in public appearances. Yet behind the scenes, she had to navigate a maze of subtle power plays, with this individual constantly positioning himself as the authority or the one with the better idea. Diana later revealed that she understood the stakes. Challenging him openly could create unnecessary conflict, tarnish her reputation, or even jeopardize contracts. But silently accepting his behavior wasn't an option either. She had to find a way to maintain her integrity while protecting her position and her creative vision. It was a delicate balance that required patience, insight, and above all, resilience. One of the most defining moments came during the recording of a major project when Diana realized the extent of his interference. He attempted to take credit for decisions she had made regarding arrangements, studio sessions, and artistic direction. While he presented these claims as collaboration or teamwork, Diana recognized them for what they truly were: a calculated effort to diminish her contributions and elevate his own standing. She confronted him privately, not with anger but with clarity, asserting her boundaries and making it clear that further attempts at undermining would not be tolerated. That confrontation marked a turning point. From that moment, Diana began to see him for exactly who he was, and she made the conscious decision to protect herself, her career, and her legacy above any personal reconciliation. By the time Diana reached the height of her career, she had learned to navigate the industry with both grace and vigilance. The experience with this individual shaped her approach to relationships, trust, and collaboration. She became more discerning about who she allowed into her inner circle, more careful with her personal disclosures, and more assertive in defending her creative vision. Yet despite the professional distance she maintained, the emotional impact lingered. Even decades later at 81, Diana admits that no other person in her career provoked the same level of frustration, disappointment, or lasting resentment. This wasn't simply about a disagreement or conflict. It was about betrayal, deception, and the realization that trust, once broken, can leave a mark that never fully fades. The final realization for Diana Ross came after decades of reflection. She understood that the person she once trusted had fundamentally misunderstood the values she held most dear: integrity, loyalty, and respect. While others might have dismissed small slights or foregone personal boundaries to maintain a professional alliance, Diana had always believed that true success could not come at the expense of dignity. The repeated betrayals by this individual left a permanent imprint on her worldview, teaching her that even in a glittering industry filled with admirers, not everyone who smiles at you has honorable intentions. It wasn't just a lesson in caution, it was a lesson in survival, one she carried throughout her career and into her personal life. Despite the resentment, Diana Ross's approach was never vengeful. She did not seek to humiliate or expose him publicly, even when given every opportunity to do so. Instead, she used the experience to strengthen herself, relying on her talent, discipline, and intuition to rise above the manipulation. Friends close to her noted that the ordeal had a profound effect on her decision-making. She became more selective in collaborations, more confident in asserting boundaries, and more focused on projects that honored her vision. Diana's career continued to flourish, and her legacy as one of the greatest performers of all time was never threatened. Yet privately, the wound remained, a quiet reminder that even the most brilliant careers can be shadowed by betrayal. What makes Diana's story particularly compelling is how personal the animosity truly was. The individual who provoked her anger wasn't an external competitor, a critic, or an opportunistic stranger. He was someone embedded in her world, someone she once allowed close, someone whose actions struck at the very heart of trust and respect. Diana explains that her hatred was never casual. It was precise and deeply felt because it violated principles she lived by. Every performance, every meticulously crafted appearance, and every career milestone carried the unspoken awareness of what she had endured. For Diana, the experience was a defining moment, one that shaped her choices, strengthened her resolve, and clarified who truly deserved her respect. Now at 81, Diana Ross reflects on this chapter of her life with honesty and clarity. She doesn't speak out of bitterness, but from a place of wisdom. She acknowledges the pain, the betrayal, and the frustration, but she also emphasizes the lessons learned, the importance of discernment, the power of self-respect, and the necessity of protecting one's own legacy. The individual who caused her so much anger stands as a reminder that even the brightest stars encounter shadows, yet it is how they respond that defines them. Diana Ross endured, thrived, and continues to shine, proving that even when someone truly earns your hatred, it cannot extinguish your brilliance. your voice or your legacy, and that is why, after more than 6 decades in the spotlight, Diana Ross can finally say with unmatched clarity that no one in her life, not an actor, a producer, or a colleague, ever tested her patience, her principles, or her resolve more than him.